the TPS decision that the U.S. Supreme Court just 6-3 about they can allow, so the president has the constitutional authority to make it temporary and not permanent.
It's the right call. You know, I've been doing this since 1984. TPS has never been temporary. That's why the whole statute exists. Temporarily give people protection while the country's in turmoil or after they suffer a hurricane. But the problem is no administration have had the guts to actually follow that statute. President Trump has the guts to follow the law. So temporary means temporary. When the condition of that country gets better, they need to go home. There are millions of people standing in line want to be part of the greatest nation on earth. And that goes back to my earlier point. People say, why you arrest them if they're not criminally under 10 years? Because they cheated the system. They may have been in 10 years, so let's remember, when you enter the country illegally, it's a crime, and they're doing that, putting themselves in front of the line while millions of people are taking their tests, doing their background investigation, paying their fees to be part of the greatest nation on earth. So temporary means temporary, and I'm grateful for that decision. I can't hear you, sir.
The TPS decision that the U.S. Supreme Court just 6-3 about they can allow, so the president has the constitutional authority to make it temporary and not permanent.
It's the right call. You know, I've been doing this since 1984. TPS has never been temporary. That's why the whole statute exists. Temporarily give people protection while the country's in turmoil or after they suffer a hurricane. But the problem is no administration have had the guts to actually follow that statute. President Trump has the guts to follow the law. So temporary means temporary. When the condition of that country gets better, they need to go home. There are millions of people standing in line want to be part of the greatest nation on earth. And that goes back to my earlier point. People say, why you arrest them if they're not criminally under 10 years? Because they cheated the system. They may have been in 10 years, so let's remember, when you enter the country illegally, it's a crime, and they're doing that, putting themselves in front of the line while millions of people are taking their tests, doing their background investigation, paying their fees to be part of the greatest nation on earth. So temporary means temporary, and I'm grateful for that decision. That's going to be a question for ICE. I mean, this just happened, so I'm sure they're developing plans along with Secretary Mullen how to implement that. But again, a great decision. Temporary should mean temporary. That's the way the law is written. I'm glad that the Supreme Court recognized that.
Yeah, and I think so. Tom talked about the mandate to fix this problem after the 4 years of Biden. And no, look, the reality is I know we're very polarized politically, but after that election, there were a lot of people on the Democrat side that acknowledged you can't just have an open border, and that was not the right policy, and it did hurt politically because voters did not want to see that, what we were seeing. So it was a major issue that needed to be tackled. So the president came in. I know Tom was very instrumental in a series of executive orders. There were policy directives issued to DHS about how to conduct both border operations and interior enforcement. And what you have is the response to that is a lot of lawfare, where activist groups will go sue in front of a liberal judge. The liberal judge will say, like they just ruled, the liberal judge just ruled, you can't enforce immigration law, in or around courthouses, which just makes no sense. I mean, that is not what the law says, certainly not what the Constitution commands, but I'm issuing a nationwide injunction. You can't do this. So those court cases and those judicial rulings are not ultimately going to be validated by the U.S. Supreme Court, as we saw with today's TPS ruling, but it's to throw sand in the gears of the immigration enforcement, to make it so that it's much more difficult to just do what the law commands us to do. It's a very curious element of American policy and law that the law on the books with regards to legal and illegal immigration is much different than what actually happens in this society, particularly over the last 20, 30 years with respect to legal and illegal immigration. And president's trying to say, okay, the law on the books is really what governs. It's not to develop things contrary to law that have no legal sanction. The problem is, you have a lot of judges that are trying to, create some tripwires there and make it more difficult. The bottom line is a district judge sitting in San Francisco can't enjoin enforcement across the entire country. And I know the U.S. Supreme Court has dialed back that supposed authority, but they still find ways to try to stymie the efforts. So you have this case that goes to the Supreme Court that was released today, 6-3, temporary protective status. Something happens in a country, maybe a natural disaster, people could come, get temporary protective status, things get stabilized, they go back. I mean, that's the intent of it, and yet it's turned into, once you get TPS, that's just indefinite. It's kind of an end run around the normal immigration system. And first of all, I don't think that's good policy. Second of all, that's not what the actual law says. But third of all, if you have something that's temporary, president can grant temporary status, and then you're saying the president can't stop the temporary, put a date on it to make sure it's temporary? I mean, it'd be crazy to have ruled any other way. And I know 3 of the liberal judges would have ruled the other way. But that was a no-brainer in terms of immigration policy and immigration enforcement. And then you're going to see this case on the courthouses. That's going to end up going up to the Supreme Court, and it's going to have a similar result. There's nothing in the law or Constitution that says that's somehow like a no-go zone for immigration enforcement. It's the most sensible place to do that in many respects. And the judge said, well, if you enforce the law there, then they won't attend their immigration hearings. And it's just like, what? I mean, what? First of all, it's not the law. So why are you doing that? So I think the 6-3 decision today was correct as a matter of law. I think it's the right policy as well. And I also think you're going to see more of these cases that are going to end up going to the Supreme Court. A lot of these folks, the very partisan judges, I mean, they're basically surmising if they can just slow things down, you're going to have 4 years with President Trump in office. If they can just drag feet, get to January 2029, and then they get somebody that's more akin to their policies, then the floodgates will open back again. And I think that's the game that's being played here. And it's not the way the Constitution was designed, and it's not the way courts are supposed to operate, but they continue to do it, and they continue to overstep their authority. Okay, thanks everybody. Appreciate it.
News never stops. The world keeps turning, and every turn tells a story. Wars, elections, geopolitics, Davids versus Goliaths.
While everyone is celebrating the US-China trade thaw, Trump has been quietly doing something else across Asia.
These were once home to the ancient Silk Road connecting east and west.
But who's connecting the dots? Who's decoding the global storm? Welcome to Times of India videos. We decode the shifting grains of geopolitics to you. From Washington to Wuhan. Everything, everywhere, all at once.
Just 2 years ago, Canada was one of the most popular countries for Indian students.
From Davos to Delhi. We track the decisions that move markets, shift policies, and shape the future. No jargon, no bias, just clear, credible, global journalism. Because understanding the world doesn't have to be complicated, it just has to be smart. And that's what we do best. At Times of India videos, we don't just tell stories, we build perspective. We connect the dots between what's global and what's personal. What's happening out there, and what it means for you. It's fast. It's fearless. It's making sense of the changing world order. Times of India videos. Because your worldview is just a tap away.